The doctrine of double effect is not just a rhetorical device of theoretical philosophers and theologians. As is clear from the many reports coming out of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, it has rather tragic real-world applications as well. With the increased reliance of the United States and NATO forces on missiles and airstrikes, both drone and manned, the DDE has become an important justification tool of U.S. warfighting. While instances of collateral damage are many, in this discussion I will consider as representative the May 4, 2009 U.S. attack on the Farah province in western Afghanistan.
Grief and sorrow continue to plague a village in western Afghanistan that was victim to a stunningly lethal airstrike by U.S. forces last Thursday. This week, a United Nations team released the findings of its on-the-ground investigation, and what they found was horrifying. Some 90 Afghan civilians were killed. Among the dead, as many as 60 children between the ages of 3 months and 16 years. It's believed to be the single deadliest U.S. airstrike against Afghan civilians since the U.S. first attacked the country in 2001.
As has been customary in such situations, American politicians and military commanders expressed the expected condolences and apologies, and just as quickly dismissed the civilian deaths as collateral damage, holding no one responsible or accountable for this tragic loss of life.
Wish to express my personal regret and certainly the sympathy of our administration on the loss of civilian life in Afghanistan. We deeply regret it. We don't know all of the circumstances or causes, and there will be a joint investigation by your government and ours. But any loss of life, any loss of innocent life, is particularly painful.
There are a number of important observations regarding this attack that are morally relevant. First, the obvious. The Afghan civilians living in Farah province had done nothing to warrant liability, a forfeiture of their immunity. They were innocent non-combatants. Second, for purposes of analysis, please consider the following hypothetical. Suppose that the Afghan civilians living in the village had become aware that an attack was imminent and they could not escape. Would they be within their rights? Would it be moral for them to respond defensively, that is, to shoot down the aircraft, killing the pilot in self-defense? I think that the answer is clearly that they would. Human beings do not lose their right to defend themselves, their right to life, because others have deemed their deaths to be inconsequential, necessary for some greater good. It is not the case, by the way, as a consequence of now being threatened by a defensive response from the Afghan villagers, that the pilot can morally target and kill them, claiming self-defense. In such a situation, the Afghans do not forfeit the very right they are justified in asserting. What is irrelevant in this hypothetical is whether the pilot has agency, or whether the threat to the Afghan civilians is directly intended or unintended, or whether the Afghan deaths are the primary or the secondary effect of the act of bombing the insurgents. In other words, what is irrelevant is the application of the DDE. Now, also of moral relevance in many incidents of collateral damage is that the responders do not merely foresee the possibility that despite reasonable preventive precautions, sometimes things go awry and non-combatants will be killed. The responders kill innocents knowingly and with free will and consent in order to achieve, in this case, the goal or objective of ending terrorism or supporting the Afghan police and military. In such cases, therefore, killing non-combatants is not accidental, but what I will term an act of collateral violence, not collateral damage. I will define an act of collateral violence as an act motivated by military necessity, in which non-combatants are harmed or killed, perhaps not with direct intent, nor as the primary goal or purpose of the act, but nevertheless knowingly and with as high a degree of probability as is the harming or killing of the terrorists. Consequently, the fact that a responder claims only to be targeting the insurgents, the Taliban, does not absolve him of causal and moral responsibility. Where the DDE justification goes wrong, I believe, is in the moral importance it assigns to the directing of intent. That is, it relies exclusively upon the intended effect of the act as proclaimed by the actor, as the crucial moral consideration for determining the permissibility and moral value of an act, rather than taking into account the entire set of foreseen probable effects. Consequently, only the intended good effect becomes morally relevant, and the foreseen evil effect, now termed collateral damage, becomes somehow abrogated and moral responsibility for the innocent deaths somehow diffused. The DDE justification fails because morality requires more than merely a proclamation of good intent. A DDE justification in such cases, and the alleged distinction between terrorism and a collaterally violent response to terrorism, between the attacks of 9/11 and the bombing of Farah province, is misguided, and merely a pretense or rationalization for military necessity, retaliation, and revenge. Both acts knowingly kill non-combatants to achieve some goal or objective. Both terrorists and responders violate the right to life of their innocent victims and fail to fulfill their obligation to respect such rights. Consequently, there is no moral difference between acts of terrorism and of collateral violence. They are morally equal. Neither are justifiable acts of war but of murder. With the civilian death toll in Afghanistan estimated at over 7,500, with almost 14,000 seriously injured, a recognition that collateral damage is nothing more than a rhetorical contrivance that trivializes the murder of innocent human beings should be of moral concern to us all.